The cellar door groaned as Callum Irwin pulled it open, bracing himself for the sight of bare wooden shelves and the musty smell of an empty larder that had haunted his nightmares for 3 months now. What greeted him instead stole the breath from his lungs. Row upon gleaming row of preserves in mismatched jars, their contents glowing amber and crimson and deep purple in the shaft of afternoon light that followed him down the stone steps. His hand found the rough wall to steady himself. This was impossible. He had checked this cellar 2 days ago, found it as barren as his fields, as empty as his future. Now it looked like a merchant's storehouse, like the cellars his mother had kept before the plague took her and his father and left him alone on this failing farm at the edge of the kingdom. Callum descended the remaining steps on unsteady legs. His boots scraped against stone as he approached the nearest shelf, reaching out with a trembling hand to touch a jar of what looked like strawberry preserves. The glass was cool and real beneath his fingertips. The wax seal was perfectly smooth, professionally done. He lifted it, feeling the weight of it, then set it down and picked up another. Blackberry, then another, apricot, plum, cherry, apple butter with cinnamon. His eyes burned as he cataloged them, counting without meaning to, 50 jars, 60. More on the shelves he had not reached yet. Someone had done this. Someone had filled his empty cellar with enough food to see him through the winter that had been creeping toward him like an executioner these past months. The rational part of his mind, the part that had kept him alive through 2 bad harvests and the loss of his parents, told him he should be terrified. Strangers did not do this. No one in the village would have helped him, not after he had nothing left to trade, no coin to pay for their labor. He should be checking the house, making sure nothing was stolen, looking for signs of who had been here. Instead, he found himself sitting on the bottom step, one of the jars of strawberry preserves cradled in his lap, and weeping like he had not wept since he buried his mother in the spring. He did not hear the footsteps above until they were already on the floorboards of his kitchen. Callum jerked his head up, swiping roughly at his eyes with the back of his hand. The cellar door was still open, spilling afternoon light down the stairs. A shadow fell across the entrance. "You found them." The voice was deep, rough around the edges but unmistakably feminine. "I hoped you would check today." Callum stood, setting the jar carefully on the step behind him. His heart hammered against his ribs as he climbed toward the light, toward that voice. When he emerged into his kitchen, he found himself face to face with an orc woman. She stood near his table, her hands clasped in front of her in a gesture that seemed oddly nervous for someone of her size. She was tall, her head nearly brushing the low beams of his ceiling, with broad shoulders and muscular arms visible beneath a simple homespun dress that looked like it had been made for a human woman but altered to fit her frame. Her skin was a deep forest green, darker than the moss that grew on the north side of his barn. Small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, and her pointed ears were pierced with simple wooden studs. Her black hair was pulled back in a thick braid that fell past her shoulders. Her eyes were what held him. They were golden like honey in sunlight, and they watched him with an expression he could not quite read. Hope, perhaps, or fear. "Who are you?" Callum managed to ask, his voice hoarse from crying. His mind raced through possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. Orcs did not come to human settlements. They kept to their mountain strongholds and their forest camps, and when they did encounter humans, it usually ended in blood. Everyone knew that. Everyone had heard the stories. "My name is Grushna." She said it carefully, as if testing how the sounds would land in his human ears. "I have been living in the old shepherd's hut on the ridge above your farm for 2 months now." Callum stared at her. The shepherd's hut had been abandoned for years, ever since old Thomas died and no one wanted to take sheep up to that high pasture anymore. It was barely standing the last time Callum had been up there, half the roof missing and the walls letting in the wind. Why? The question came out sharper than he intended. Grushna's shoulders tensed, and Callum noticed for the first time that despite her size and obvious strength, she looked thin. Not starving, but lean in a way that spoke of too many meals skipped. I was cast out from my clan. I needed somewhere to hide until winter, then I will move on. The hut is far enough from the village that no humans see me. I did not think anyone used that ridge anymore. Cast out? Why? Something flickered in those golden eyes. Pain, perhaps. Old pain. I helped a human child who was lost in the mountains. Brought her back to the edge of her village, made sure she was safe. My clan said I was weak, that humans are the enemy, that the child would grow up to kill orcs, that I had betrayed my people for sentiment. She paused, her jaw working. They were not wrong about the last part. I could not leave her to die in the cold. Callum felt something shift in his chest. He looked back at the cellar door, then at her. The preserves. You made them. Yes. Grushna's hands tightened where they were clasped. I have been gathering from the wild places. Berries, fruits from the old abandoned orchards beyond the ridge. My mother taught me to preserve food before. She trailed off. I have been watching your farm. I do not mean that in a frightening way, she added quickly. But I see you from the ridge. I saw you struggling. Saw you trying to bring in the harvest alone. Saw you getting thinner. So you decided to fill my cellar with food. Callum heard the incredulity in his own voice. I know what it is like to be alone, Grushna said quietly, to have no one. I thought perhaps I could help without bothering you. I came at night, I was careful. I did not mean to frighten you. Callum walked to his table and pulled out a chair, sitting down heavily. His legs felt unsteady again. The orc woman had been living on his land for 2 months, and he had never known. She had been gathering food and preserving it and sneaking it into his cellar like some kind of strange fairy tale. He should be angry. He should be terrified. Instead, he felt a laugh bubbling up in his chest, half hysterical. I thought I was going to die this winter, he said, looking up at her. I was preparing for it, making peace with it. Grushna's expression crumpled into something like anguish. I am sorry. I should have done more, I should have helped sooner. I just did not know if you would. Thank you. The words came out fierce, stopping her mid-sentence. Thank you. I do not know why you did this, why you helped me, but thank you. They stared at each other across his small kitchen. Outside, Callum could hear the chickens clucking in their pen, the distant sound of wind moving through the bare branches of his apple trees. Normal sounds. The world continuing as it always had, despite the impossible thing that was happening in his house. Are you hungry? Callum asked, surprising himself. Grushna blinked. What? Are you hungry? I am asking if you want to eat something. I do not have much, but I have bread, and apparently I have preserves now. He felt a smile tugging at his mouth despite everything. Seems wrong not to share them with the person who made them. You do not have to. I know I do not have to. I am asking if you want to. Grushna stood very still for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yes, I would like that. Callum rose and went to his pantry, pulling out the loaf of bread he had baked 2 days ago. It was a bit stale now, but still good. He cut thick slices while Grushna remained standing by the table, looking uncertain. You can sit, he told her, gesturing to a chair. The chair will not hold me. I am too heavy. Callum looked at his chairs, old and creaking but solid oak that his father had made. Try it. If it breaks, I will make a stronger one. She sat gingerly as if expecting the chair to shatter beneath her. It held. She looked almost comically surprised, and Callum found himself genuinely smiling for the first time in months. He went down to the cellar, and retrieved a jar of the strawberry preserves, then brought it and the bread to the table. They ate in silence at first, Callum watching as Grushna spread the red preserves on her bread with the care of someone who was not used to kindness. She ate slowly, deliberately, making the food last. "How long since you have had a proper meal?" Callum asked. "I eat enough." Her tone was defensive. "That was not what I asked." Grushna set down her bread. "2 weeks, perhaps. I have been using most of what I gather for the preserves. For you, that stops now." Callum heard the firmness in his own voice. "You cannot help me by starving yourself. That is foolish." Her eyes flashed. "I am not. You are too thin. I can see it. And if you have been living in that old hut, you are probably cold at night too. Half the roof is gone. I have managed." "I am sure you have, but you do not have to just manage anymore." Callum took a breath, hardly believing the words that were about to come out of his mouth. "Stay in the barn. It is weatherproof and there is space in the loft. I will bring you blankets and we can share meals. In exchange, if you are willing, you can help me with the farm work. I need help bringing in the rest of the harvest, repairing the fences before winter. And apparently you are good at preserving food, which is a skill I never learned properly." Grushna stared at him as if he had grown a second head. "You are offering me shelter, on your farm, where anyone from the village might see me. The village is 3 miles away and no one comes up here anymore. They think my farm is cursed because both my parents died. They are superstitious fools." Bitterness crept into his voice. "Not one of them offered help when I needed it, but you did. You, a stranger, someone I have never met. So yes, I am offering you shelter. If they find out there is an orc here, then I will deal with it. This is my land. I decide who stays on it." Something in Grushna's expression shifted. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "You do not know me." "I could be dangerous, are you?" "No. Then we have no problem," she laughed, a short, shocked sound. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Callum Irwin. You know my name. It is on the deed marker at the edge of your property. I read it when I first came down from the ridge." She paused. "I did not think you would ever know I was here. I was going to leave in the spring, go further north where there are fewer humans. You do not have to leave." The words came out before Callum had fully thought them through, but once they were said, he realized he meant them. "If you want to stay, you can stay, at least through the winter. We can figure out the rest later." Grushna looked down at her hands at the half-eaten bread and preserves. When she looked up again, her golden eyes were fierce with emotion. "I will earn my keep. I will work hard. I will not be a burden. I believe you." And strangely, he did. They finished their meal in more comfortable silence, and then Callum showed Grushna to the barn. It was a solid structure, better maintained than the house in some ways because the animals depended on it. There were only 2 cows and a handful of chickens now, down from the dozen cattle and larger flock his parents had kept, but the barn was still large enough to house them all with room to spare. The loft was full of hay, golden and sweet-smelling from the summer cutting. Callum climbed up the ladder and cleared a space in the corner, piling the hay to make a soft bed. Grushna watched from below, her expression unreadable. "I will bring you blankets," Callum said, climbing back down, "and a pillow. It is not much, but it is warmer than that hut." "It is more than I expected to have." Grushna's voice was soft. "More than I deserve, perhaps. Everyone deserves a warm place to sleep and enough food to eat. That is not something you have to earn." She looked at him for a long moment, and Callum felt his cheeks heat under that golden gaze. He turned away, busying himself with checking on the cows. "I will be back with those blankets. Make yourself comfortable." He left before she could respond, walking quickly across the yard to his house. Inside, he leaned against the closed door and tried to understand what he had just done. He had invited an orc to live on his farm. If anyone from the village found out, there would be trouble. They already avoided him, but this would turn avoidance into outright hostility, or worse. But when he thought about Grushna sitting in his kitchen, eating bread and preserves with such careful gratitude, when he remembered the cellar full of food that she had made for him while going hungry herself, he could not bring himself to regret his choice. Callum gathered his spare blankets, the ones his mother had woven years ago, and an extra pillow. He paused, then went to his pantry and wrapped up what was left of the bread along with some dried apples and a piece of hard cheese. It was not much, but Grushna could eat before she slept. When he returned to the barn, he found her in the loft, sitting on the hay with her knees drawn up. She looked younger like that, less like the strong warrior woman and more like someone who was simply tired. "Here," Callum said, passing up the blankets and pillow. "And food for later." Grushna took them, her hands gentle despite their obvious strength. "Thank you, Callum. Tomorrow we will start on the harvest. The squash needs to come in and the last of the potatoes. If we work together, we can get it done before the first frost. I will be ready at dawn." Callum nodded and climbed back down the ladder. At the barn door, he paused and looked back up at the loft. "Grushna, I am glad you stayed. I am glad I am not alone anymore." He left before she could answer, but he thought he heard a soft sound that might have been a sob or might have been a laugh, or perhaps both at once. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that Callum had not known he was craving. He woke with the sun and found Grushna already awake, already feeding the animals or checking the fences or doing some task that needed doing. They worked side by side in the fields, pulling up potatoes and cutting squash from the vine. Grushna was stronger than him by far, able to lift loads that would have taken him 2 trips, but she never made him feel weak for it. She simply did the work that needed her strength and left him to do the work that needed his knowledge of the farm. They spoke little at first, both unused to company. But gradually, as the days passed and the harvest came in, they began to talk. Small things at first. Grushna asked about the farm, about how long his family had lived here. Callum asked about the mountains, about what it was like to live in an orc clan. She answered carefully, as if picking her words to avoid giving him nightmares. "We are not monsters," she said one afternoon as they worked to repair a section of fence. "But we are not gentle either. Life in the mountains is hard. Food is scarce in winter. We raid human settlements sometimes, take what we need to survive. I do not expect you to forgive that." Callum hammered a nail into the fence post, thinking. "And humans raid orc camps too. Kill orc children, burn your homes. I have heard the stories the soldiers tell when they come through the village. They brag about it." He looked at her. "I think maybe both our peoples have done terrible things. That does not mean we have to keep doing them." Grushna's expression was unreadable. "You are strange for a human." "I have been told I am strange for a lot of things." Callum grinned. "Too bookish, my father said. Too soft, the village boys said. Too poor to matter, everyone says now. You are not too soft, you are kind. That is different." The words settled into Callum's chest like a warm coal. No one had called him kind in a long time. Practical, perhaps. Desperate. Unlucky. But not kind. They finished the fence as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Callum straightened, feeling the pleasant ache of a full day's work in his muscles. The harvest was nearly done now. The cellar was full of vegetables and those jars of preserves. The fences were mended. For the first time since his parents died, he felt like the farm might actually survive the winter. "Come to the house for supper," he said to Grushna. "I am making stew." "Well, I am attempting stew. My cooking is not as good as my mother's was, but it is edible." Grushna hesitated. She always hesitated when he invited her into the house, as if she still could not quite believe she was welcome there. but she followed him across the yard as twilight deepened around them. Callum's stew was indeed edible, if not particularly inspired. They ate at the table, the fire crackling in the hearth. Grushna had seconds, then thirds, and Callum was glad he had made a large pot. She was finally putting on weight, her cheeks filling out, her arms growing even more muscular as the work and regular meals restored her strength. "Tell me about your family," Callum said, surprising himself. They had talked about many things, but Grushna rarely spoke of her past beyond the barest details. She was quiet for a long moment, her spoon still in her bowl. "My mother was a healer. She taught me about plants, about which ones could cure and which ones could kill. She taught me to preserve food so nothing was wasted. My father was a hunter, strong, respected in the clan. He died fighting humans when I was young. I am sorry. It was a long time ago. My mother remarried. My stepfather was not cruel, but he did not understand me. When I was cast out, my mother did not speak for me. She could not. It would have meant being cast out herself." Grushna set down her spoon. "I do not blame her. Survival in the clan is everything. Sentiment is weakness. That sounds like a hard way to live. It is the only way I knew until now." She looked around the small kitchen, at the fire and the table and the simple comfort of it. "This is different. You are different. Different good or different bad. I have not decided yet." But she was smiling slightly, just the barest upturn of her lips, and Callum felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. He cleared his throat. "There is a harvest festival in the village next week. I usually do not go, but I thought I might this year. Trade some of our vegetables for things we need. Flour, salt, maybe some fabric." He paused. "You would have to stay here, I am sorry. It is not safe, I know." Grushna's voice was calm. "I will watch the farm while you are gone, perhaps do some hunting. We could use meat for the winter." "You do not have to. I want to. I am good at hunting. My father taught me before he died." So it was settled. Callum spent the next few days preparing for the festival, sorting through their vegetables and selecting the best for trade. Grushna helped him load them into the old cart, then stepped back to watch as he hitched up Daisy, the older of his 2 cows. "Be careful," she said, and there was something in her voice that made Callum look at her sharply. "It is just the village. I have been there 100 times. I know. But still, be careful." He wanted to ask what she was worried about, but the sun was already high and the village was 3 miles away. If he wanted to get there while the festival was in full swing, he needed to leave now. The journey to the village felt strange after so many weeks on the farm with only Grushna for company. The road was rutted and dusty, and he passed a few other farmers heading the same direction, but no one called out to him. No one offered a friendly wave. He was still the cursed farmer, the unlucky one, the man whose parents had died and left him with a failing farm. People did not want that kind of luck rubbing off on them. The village square was crowded with people when Callum arrived, colorful banners strung between the buildings and the smell of roasting meat and fresh bread heavy in the air. He set up his cart on the edge of the market and began arranging his vegetables. They were good quality despite the hard year, the potatoes large and clean, the squash bright orange and free of blemishes. He had Grushna to thank for that. Her knowledge of when to harvest and how to handle the produce had saved a crop that might have rotted in the field if he had managed it alone. People came to look at his wares, and to his surprise, several actually bought from him. The blacksmith's wife took a basketful of potatoes. A farmer from the north side of the village traded him a sack of flour for 2 large squash. Slowly, his cart emptied and his purse grew heavier. He was negotiating with a cloth merchant over some wool fabric when he heard raised voices nearby. Callum looked over to see a group of men gathered near the tavern, their voices angry. One of them was Marcus, the village headman's son, a bully who had made Callum's childhood miserable. Said it was an orc, plain as day, big as a house, green skin, tusks, up on the ridge by old Irwin's place. Callum's blood ran cold. Probably hunting, another man said. You know they come down from the mountains sometimes. This one was not hunting, it was carrying something. Looked like it was foraging, gathering plants. Marcus spat on the ground. Might be planning to settle. We should organize a hunting party, go up there and kill it before it becomes a problem. Callum did not remember deciding to move. One moment he was standing by his cart, the next he was striding across the square toward the group of men. There is no orc on the ridge, he said loudly, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. Marcus turned, his face splitting into a sneer when he saw who had spoken. Callum Irwin. Did not know you were still alive. Figured you would have starved by now. There is no orc, Callum repeated, ignoring the jab. Your friend probably saw a deer or a bear. I know what I saw, said a younger man that Callum recognized as one of the village hunters. It was an orc. Female, I think. Tall green, carrying a basket. The ridge is part of my land, Callum said, trying to keep his voice steady. If there was an orc there, I would know about it. I am up there all the time checking my sheep fences. He had not owned sheep in 2 years, but he gambled that no one remembered that. Marcus stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. You calling Davis a liar, Irwin? I am saying he made a mistake. It happens. Shadows in the forest can look like a lot of things. Or maybe you have been hiding it. Marcus's voice dropped, became dangerous. Maybe you are so desperate and pathetic that you have been harboring a monster. That would be just like you, would it not? Too weak to survive on your own, so you make deals with orcs. That is insane. Callum forced a laugh. Why would I do that? Why would an orc help me? Why indeed? Marcus looked him up and down. Although you are looking better than the last time I saw you, less like a walking skeleton. Been eating well lately, have you? Callum's mind raced. He needed to end this conversation, needed to get back to the farm and warn Grushna. If they organized a hunting party, if they came up to his land with weapons and torches. I had a good harvest, he said shortly. Better than expected. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to finish my trading and get home before dark. He turned and walked back to his cart before Marcus could respond, forcing himself not to run even though every instinct screamed at him to do exactly that. He packed up his remaining vegetables with shaking hands, barely hearing the cloth merchant as she tried to continue their negotiation. He thrust coins at her, took the fabric, and loaded everything into his cart. The journey back to the farm felt like it took years. Callum kept looking over his shoulder, expecting to see torches, to hear the baying of dogs and the shouts of angry men. But the road behind him remained empty. Maybe they had believed him. Maybe they would forget about it. Or maybe they were just waiting for dark. He urged Daisy into a faster walk, the cart bouncing over the rough road. By the time he reached his farm, the sun was setting, and his hands were white-knuckled on the reins. Grushna came out of the barn as he pulled into the yard, a smile on her face that died the moment she saw his expression. What happened? Callum climbed down from the cart, his legs unsteady. Someone saw you, one of the village hunters. He saw you on the ridge. The color drained from Grushna's face, her green skin paling to something closer to sage. What did you tell them? I said he was wrong. That there was no orc. I do not think they believed me, but I do not know if they will do anything about it. He grabbed her arm, pulled her toward the barn. We need to hide you. If they come here, they will burn your farm. Grushna pulled free of his grip. Callum, if they think you are harboring an orc, they will destroy everything. They might kill you. Then we need to be ready. His mind was working frantically. The root cellar under the house. It is small, but you could hide there. Or the old well by the south field, it is dry now, you could. No. Grushna's voice was firm. I will not hide. If they come, I will leave. I will go back to the mountains. The hell you will. Callum was shocked by the fierceness in his own voice. This is your home now. I will not let them drive you away. This was never my home. It was a temporary shelter, a kindness you extended, but I always knew it could not last. Stop talking like that. Callum realized he was shouting and lowered his voice with effort. Stop talking like you do not matter, like you can just disappear and it would not. He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Grushna was staring at him, her golden eyes wide. Would not what? Would not destroy me, Callum said quietly. These past weeks, having you here, working beside you, eating meals together, it has been the happiest I have been since my parents died. Maybe the happiest I have been ever. I know that sounds foolish. I know we barely know each other, but I do not want you to leave. I do not want to be alone again. The silence between them felt enormous. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called. The wind moved through the bare apple trees with a sound like rushing water. I do not want to leave either, Grushna said finally, her voice rough. I have been alone for so long. Since they cast me out, I thought I would never have a place, never belong anywhere. And then you offered me shelter and kindness, and I started to feel like maybe I could have something more than just survival. She took a shuddering breath. But I cannot let you risk everything for me. I am not worth it. Yes, you are. Callum stepped closer. You are worth it. You are worth the risk, worth the fight, worth whatever consequences come. Do you understand me? Grushna was crying now, tears tracking down her green cheeks. Why? Why do you care so much? Because Callum stopped, his heart hammering. The truth was rising in him like water from a spring, impossible to hold back. Because I think I am falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and absolutely true. Callum watched Grushna's face, watched shock and disbelief, and something that might have been hope flash across her features. You cannot, she whispered. I am an orc. You are human. That is not, it does not, I do not care. And he realized he meant it completely. I do not care what you are. I care who you are. I care that you are kind and strong and you filled my cellar with preserves because you could not stand to watch me go hungry. I care that you laugh at my terrible jokes and you work harder than anyone I have ever met and you look at me like I matter. Like I am not just the poor cursed farmer but someone worth knowing. Callum. His name was a sob on her lips. I know this is fast. I know it is insane. But these are the facts. You are here, and I do not want you to leave, and I think you feel something for me too. Am I wrong? No. Grushna's voice was barely audible. No, you are not wrong. She took a shaky breath. I have been trying not to feel this way, trying to tell myself it was just gratitude, just loneliness, but every day it gets harder to pretend. When you smile at me, when you thank me for my work like it matters, when you sit across from me at dinner and talk to me like I am a person and not a monster. She broke off, covering her face with her hands. I love you. God help me, I love you, and it is the most foolish thing I have ever done. Callum closed the distance between them and pulled her hands gently away from her face. Then, we are both fools. He kissed her. He had never kissed anyone before, had no idea if he was doing it right. But Grushna made a small sound against his mouth and kissed him back, and that was all that mattered. Her tusks brushed against his cheeks, strange but not unpleasant. Her hands came up to cup his face, so gentle despite their strength. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Grushna was laughing and crying at the same time. This is madness, probably. Callum grinned at her. But I have been practical and careful my whole life, and where did it get me? Alone on a failing farm waiting to die. I would rather be mad with you than practical without you. If the village comes, Then we will deal with it together. I am not letting you go. Not now, not ever, if you will have me. Grushna pulled him into a fierce embrace, and Callum wrapped his arms around her, feeling the solid warmth of her, the realness of her. They stood like that in the darkening yard, holding each other as the first stars came out overhead. We should prepare, Grushna said finally, though she made no move to let go. In case they do come. Agreed. Callum forced himself to step back, though he kept hold of her hand. Let us get the animals into the barn, secure the house. We can take turns keeping watch tonight. They worked quickly and efficiently, their earlier fear transmuted into determined action. The cows and chickens were ushered into the barn. Callum filled buckets with water from the well and placed them strategically around the house in case of fire. Grushna retrieved a long hunting knife from the barn loft, and Callum found his father's old sword, dusty and half-forgotten in the back of a closet. You know how to use that? Grushna asked, eyeing the sword. Not really. Father tried to teach me, but I was never very good at it. Then let us hope we do not need it. They settled in to wait. Callum built up the fire in the hearth and they sat at the kitchen table, hands clasped across the worn wood. The night deepened outside the windows, full of sounds that made them both jump. A fox calling in the distance. An owl hunting. The wind rattling the shutters. But no torches appeared on the road. No angry voices. As the hours crept past midnight and toward dawn, Callum began to let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they had been worried over nothing. Perhaps they did believe you, Grushna said quietly, her thumb tracing circles on the back of his hand. Perhaps the hunter decided he was mistaken. Perhaps. Callum did not quite believe it, but he wanted to. They dozed fitfully in their chairs as the night wore on, jerking awake at every sound. When dawn finally broke, gray and cold, they were both exhausted but unharmed. The farm stood quiet around them, undisturbed. We survived the night, Callum said, trying for a smile. One night. Grushna's expression was troubled. But what about the next, and the one after that? Callum, we cannot live like this. Always waiting, always afraid. Then what do you suggest? She was quiet for a long moment, staring into the cold ashes of the fire. I could leave during the day. Find a cave deeper in the mountains, somewhere far from human lands. I could come back at night, help you with the work that needs doing in darkness. No, Callum's voice was flat. I told you last night I am not doing this without you. We find another way. What other way is there? We cannot tell the village about us. They would kill us both. Maybe not all of them. An idea was forming in Callum's mind, fragile as spun glass but growing stronger. There are people in the village who are not like Marcus and his ilk. Good people who are just afraid because they have been taught to be afraid. If they could see you, see that you are not a monster, maybe they would understand. That is a very big maybe. I know. But what if it worked? What if we could change their minds, even just a few of them? It would be a start. Grushna looked at him like he had proposed flying to the moon. You want to introduce me to the villagers. You want to parade your orc lover in front of people who think my people are monsters to be slaughtered. When you put it like that, it does sound insane. Callum rubbed his face. I do not know, I do not have a better plan, I just know that hiding is not a life, not for you, not for me, not for us. Us. Grushna said the word softly as if testing its weight. I like the sound of that, even if it is impossible. Nothing is impossible. Just very, very difficult. She laughed despite herself. You are an optimist. Someone has to be. They made breakfast together as the sun climbed higher, neither of them speaking of their exhaustion or their fear. There was something calming about the familiar routine, the simple act of cutting bread and warming leftover stew. They ate standing up, too tired to bother with chairs, and Callum found himself watching Grushna's profile in the morning light. The strong line of her jaw, the way her pointed ears twitched slightly when she was thinking, the curve of her tusks. She was beautiful. He had thought so from the beginning, though he had not let himself fully acknowledge it. But there was no point in hiding from the truth anymore, not after last night. He loved her. He loved an orc woman, and the world would condemn him for it, but he could not bring himself to care. "Stop staring at me," Grushna said without looking at him, but there was a smile in her voice. "I cannot help it. You are ridiculous. You love me anyway." "I do." She turned to face him, her expression soft. "I do love you, more than I thought I could love anyone." Callum set down his bowl and closed the distance between them, pulling her into a kiss that was deeper and more confident than the night before. Grushna responded eagerly, her hands sliding into his hair, and for a few precious moments the rest of the world fell away. They were still wrapped in each other's arms when the knock came at the door. They froze, pulling apart to stare at each other in shock. The knock came again, firm but not aggressive. Callum's heart was suddenly in his throat. "The cellar," he whispered urgently. "Go now." But Grushna was already shaking her head. "If they search the house, they will find me, and then it will be worse for you because you will have lied." "Grushna, trust me, please." Another knock and then a voice. Callum Irwin, it is Father Benedict. I need to speak with you." Father Benedict, the village priest, an old man who had been kind to Callum after his parents died. Not Marcus, not a mob with torches, just the priest. Callum looked at Grushna, saw the determination in her eyes, and made his choice. He took her hand, laced his fingers through hers, and together they walked to the door. Father Benedict was exactly where Callum had left him in his memory. White-haired, slightly stooped, with sharp blue eyes that missed very little. Those eyes widened as the door opened and he saw Grushna standing beside Callum, but to his credit the old priest did not flinch or cry out. "Father," Callum said, his voice steadier than he felt. "This is Grushna. She has been living on my farm and helping me with the harvest." "I see." Father Benedict's gaze moved between them, taking in their clasped hands, their defensive postures. "May I come in? I would like to speak with you both." Callum wanted to refuse, wanted to slam the door and barricade it, but Grushna squeezed his hand gently and nodded. They stepped back and the priest entered the small kitchen. He looked around, his gaze cataloging the two bowls on the table, the blankets folded on the chair where they had dozed through the night, the sword propped against the wall. When his eyes came back to them, his expression was unreadable. "There was talk in the village yesterday," Father Benedict said quietly, "about an orc on the ridge. Marcus wanted to form a hunting party immediately, but I convinced the headman to wait. I said I would come up here first, speak with you, find out the truth." He paused. "I did not expect this." "Are you going to tell them?" Callum's voice came out harsher than he intended. "Are you going to bring the mob up here to burn my farm and kill Grushna?" "No." The answer was immediate and firm. "No, I am not. But I need to understand what is happening here. How long has she been with you?" 2 months, Grushna said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was steady despite the fear Callum could feel thrumming through their joined hands. "I was cast out from my clan. I found the old shepherd's hut on the ridge and sheltered there. I saw Callum struggling with his farm. I helped him without him knowing. Then he found out and he offered me a place to stay. And in return I work. I help with the harvest, with the animals, with whatever needs doing. I earn my keep." Father Benedict's gaze sharpened. "Is that all?" Callum felt his face heat. "No. That is not all. I love her and she loves me. I know what you are going to say, do you?" The priest's voice was mild. "What am I going to say, Callum? That it is wrong, that it is unnatural. That humans and orcs are enemies, that we should not, that we cannot," he trailed off, the words tangling in his throat. "Actually," Father Benedict said, I was going to say that love is a gift from God wherever it is found, and that judging people by what they are rather than who they are is a sin I have seen tear apart too many communities. The silence that followed was profound. Callum stared at the old priest, unable to believe what he had just heard. "You are not angry." Grushna's voice was small, disbelieving. "Angry? No. Concerned for your safety. Yes. Worried about what will happen when the rest of the village finds out. Absolutely." Father Benedict moved to the table and sat down, gesturing for them to do the same. "But angry at you for loving each other? No, that would be foolish." Slowly, Callum and Grushna sat across from him, still holding hands. Callum felt like the ground had shifted beneath him, like everything he thought he knew about the world had just been rearranged. "Why are you helping us?" he asked. Father Benedict was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. 40 years ago, before I became a priest, I knew a man. A good man, kind and brave. He died in a skirmish with orcs on the northern border. For years, I hated all orcs because of it. I thought they were monsters, irredeemable." He looked at Grushna. "Then, about 10 years ago, an orc child wandered into the village. She was starving, terrified. Her clan had been wiped out by human soldiers. She was alone. Most people wanted to kill her or drive her away, but one family took her in, hid her, fed her. When I found out, I was furious. I demanded they turn her over to the authorities." "What happened?" Grushna asked. The mother of the family asked me a question. She asked if God's love was only for humans or if it was for all his creations. She asked me if the child, who had done nothing wrong, deserved to die simply because of what she was. Father Benedict smiled sadly. "I did not have a good answer, so I helped them. We smuggled the child north, found her a safe place with an orc clan that was peaceful, that did not raid human lands. And I learned that hatred is easy, but understanding requires courage." Callum felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of fear he had been carrying since he first realized how he felt about Grushna. "So what do we do? How do we make the village understand?" "That is the difficult question." Father Benedict drummed his fingers on the table, thinking. "Marcus and his friends will not be swayed. They see orcs as animals, as monsters. But there are others in the village who are not so set in their ways. People who remember kindness, who are capable of change. If we can convince them, the others will be outnumbered." "How do we convince them?" Grushna asked. "By showing them who you are. By letting them see that you are not a threat, that you have been living peacefully alongside Callum, helping him. If they can see you as a person rather than a monster, it will be harder for them to justify violence." "That sounds dangerous," Callum said. "What if they attack her? What if they do not give her a chance to prove herself?" "It is dangerous," the priest agreed, "but hiding is also dangerous. Eventually, someone else will see Grushna, and the next time I might not be able to hold back the hunting party." He looked at them both seriously. "You need allies in the village, people who will speak for you, who will stand with you if trouble comes." "I can be one of those allies, but I cannot be the only one." Callum thought of the people in the village, running through them in his mind. Most would side with Marcus, he was sure of that, but there were a few who might be different. Sarah, the blacksmith's wife, who had always been kind to him. Old Thomas's daughter, Meredith, who had a sharp tongue and no patience for bullies. The widow Eleanor, who lived on the edge of the village and kept to herself, but had once told Callum she did not trust mob justice. "There are a few people who might listen," he said slowly. "But I do not know how to approach them. If I just walk up and say I have been living with an orc, they will panic. Then we need to be strategic." Father Benedict leaned forward. "The winter festival is in 3 weeks. Everyone in the village will be there. What if Grushna came with you? In plain sight, with me and anyone else we can convince to stand with her. Make it a public declaration. That way, if anyone tries to attack, They will have to do it in front of the whole village, and most people are not brave enough to commit violence when everyone is watching. You want to use shame as protection, Grushna said, her voice thoughtful. It might work, or it might get us all killed. I will not lie to you, there is risk, but I believe the people of our village are better than their worst instincts if given a chance to prove it. And I believe you two deserve that chance. Callum looked at Grushna, saw the fear and hope warring in her golden eyes. What do you think? I think this is the bravest, most foolish plan I have ever heard. She took a shaky breath. I think it might be our only option. And I think if you are willing to stand beside me through it, I am willing to try. Always, Callum said. I will always stand beside you. Father Benedict stood, his expression satisfied. Then we have 3 weeks to prepare. I will speak with the people I think might be sympathetic, lay the groundwork. In the meantime, you two should continue as you have been. Keep the farm running, be visible but not provocative. If anyone asks about Grushna, do not lie, but do not volunteer information either. We want this to be a controlled revelation, not a scandal. Thank you, Callum said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for helping us. Thank me when this is over and you are both still alive. But the priest was smiling. He moved to the door, then paused. One more thing. Marcus is not stupid. He will be watching this farm, be careful. And if anything happens, if you are threatened, come to the church. It is sanctuary, and even Marcus will not violate that. After Father Benedict left, Callum and Grushna sat in silence for a long moment, processing everything that had just happened. Finally, Grushna laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. We are really doing this. We are really going to walk into a village full of humans who think I am a monster and hope they do not kill me on sight. When you put it like that, it sounds terrible. Callum pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. But we are not alone. We have Father Benedict. And we will have others, I am sure of it. Not everyone in the village is like Marcus. I hope you are right. So do I. The next 3 weeks were some of the strangest of Callum's life. On the surface, everything continued as it had before. He and Grushna worked the farm, preparing for winter, hunting for meat to supplement their stores, chopping wood for the fires that would keep them warm through the cold months. They fell into a routine that was almost domestic, eating meals together, talking late into the night, sharing the same bed in the house because neither of them wanted to be apart. But underneath the normalcy, tension thrummed like a plucked string. Every sound from the road made them both jump. Every stranger Callum saw in the village when he made his weekly trips for supplies might be an enemy. Grushna kept her hunting knife close always now, and Callum had taken to wearing his father's old sword on his belt. Father Benedict visited twice more, bringing news. He had spoken with Sarah, the blacksmith's wife, and she had agreed to stand with them at the festival. He had also convinced old Meredith and 2 other families, people who had known Callum's parents and who were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. It was not many, but it was something. What about Marcus? Callum asked during the priest's second visit. He is suspicious, but so far he has taken no action. I think he is waiting to see what happens at the festival. He knows if he moves against you now, it will look like he is acting without the support of the village. He is patient. He will wait for a moment when he can claim justification. So the festival is a trap, Grushna said quietly, for us or for him, depending on how it goes. Essentially, yes. Father Benedict did not sugarcoat it, but it is the best chance we have. If we can sway public opinion now before he acts, he will be powerless to move against you later. The night before the festival, Callum could not sleep. He lay beside Grushna in the darkness, listening to her breathe, memorizing the feel of her warmth against him. If everything went wrong tomorrow, this might be the last peaceful moment they had. Are you awake? Grushna's voice was soft in the darkness. Yes, I am frightened. So am I. She rolled over to face him, her golden eyes catching the faint moonlight from the window. If this goes badly, if they attack, I want you to run. Do not try to protect me. Just run and save yourself. Absolutely not. Callum, no. We do this together or not at all. I am not losing you. You are the most stubborn man I have ever met. You love me anyway. I do. She kissed him, deep and desperate. I do love you. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know that. You have given me more happiness in these few months than I thought I would ever have in my whole life. You have made me feel like I matter, like I am worth something. That is a gift I can never repay. You do not have to repay it. That is what love is. Callum cupped her face in his hands. We are going to get through this. We are going to walk into that village and we are going to show them that love is stronger than hate. And then we are going to come home and live our lives together. That is what is going to happen. You sound very certain. I have to be. If I let myself believe anything else, I will fall apart. They held each other through the rest of the night, dozing fitfully, until dawn broke pale and cold through the window. It was time. They dressed in their best clothes. For Callum, that meant his father's old vest over a clean shirt, trousers without holes, and boots he had polished to a shine. For Grushna, it meant the dress she had worn the day they met, cleaned and mended, and a shawl that Callum's mother had made years ago. She looked beautiful and terrified, and Callum's heart ached for her. They ate a silent breakfast, neither of them really tasting the food. Then they harnessed Daisy to the cart and set out for the village. The journey felt both endless and far too short. Callum drove while Grushna sat beside him, her hands clenched in her lap. As they neared the village, they began to pass other people on the road, families heading to the festival. The reactions were immediate and varied. Some people stared in open shock. Others turned away quickly, grabbing their children and hurrying off the road. One man spat at them as they passed, and Callum felt Grushna flinch beside him. "Keep going," she murmured. "Do not stop." They did not stop. They drove straight into the village square, where the festival was already in full swing. Banners hung between the buildings, and tables were laden with food and crafts. Music played somewhere, a fiddle and drum, but it stuttered to a stop as Callum brought the cart to a halt in the center of the square. Silence fell like a blanket. Every eye turned to them. Callum helped Grushna down from the cart, very aware of how her hand trembled in his. They stood together in the center of the square, and Callum felt the weight of 100 stares. Then Father Benedict was there, moving through the crowd with his walking stick, his white hair gleaming in the winter sunlight. He stood beside them, facing the crowd. "People of the village," he said, his voice carrying across the square. "Some of you have heard rumors about an orc living on Callum Irwin's farm. I am here to tell you that the rumors are true. This is Grushna. She has been living with Callum for 3 months now, helping him with his harvest, working his farm. She has harmed no one. She has stolen nothing. She has been a good neighbor and a good person. And I ask that you give her a chance to prove herself to you as she has proven herself to me." The silence stretched. Then a voice called out from the crowd, harsh and angry. "She is an orc. They are monsters. They kill humans." "So do humans kill orcs," Father Benedict replied calmly. "We have raided their lands, burned their homes, slaughtered their children. Are we monsters too?" "That is different." It was Marcus, pushing his way to the front of the crowd. His face was red with anger. "They started it. They raid our villages, steal our livestock, and we stole their lands first." Father Benedict did not back down. "I am not saying orcs are blameless. I am saying that violence begets violence and hatred begets hatred. But here, now, we have a chance to break that cycle. One orc, one woman who has chosen peace, who has helped one of our own when he needed it most. If we repay that kindness with violence, what does that make us? It makes us smart, Marcus snarled. It makes us survivors. You want us to welcome a monster into our village. What is next, inviting them to raid us in our sleep? Grushna has been sleeping on Callum's farm for 3 months and has raided no one, Sarah the blacksmith's wife said, stepping forward from the crowd. I spoke with Callum. I know what she did for him. She saved his life with her help. That does not sound like a monster to me. She bewitched him. Marcus was nearly shouting now. She has him under some kind of spell, making him think he is in love with her. It is disgusting. I am not under a spell. Callum's voice rang out clear and strong, surprising himself. I am in love with Grushna because she is kind and brave and good. Because she has worked harder than anyone I have ever known. Because she makes me laugh and makes me want to be better. Those are the reasons I love her, not magic, not spells, just her as she is. You are a fool and a traitor, Marcus spat, and you will regret this. Maybe. Callum felt Grushna's hand tight in his. But I would rather be a fool in love than a coward in hate. The crowd murmured, some in agreement, some in anger. Callum could see people arguing among themselves, families splitting as parents disagreed with children, neighbors turning on neighbors. Then Grushna spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it carried in the tense silence. I do not expect you to trust me. I do not expect you to welcome me. I am an orc, and your people and mine have been enemies for generations. But I am also a person. I feel fear and hope and love just as you do. I have been alone and hungry and desperate just as many of you have. When I found Callum, I saw someone who needed help, and I helped him because it was the right thing to do. Not because I wanted something from him. Not because I had some dark plan. Just because it was right. If you cannot accept me, I understand. But do not punish Callum for showing me kindness. He is a good man. He deserves better than your hatred. The silence that followed was different, thoughtful. Callum saw faces in the crowd shifting, people reconsidering. Not everyone, not even most, but some. It was a start. Then an old woman pushed her way to the front. Widow Eleanor, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked at Grushna for a long moment, then at Callum. You say she has been helping with your farm. Yes, madam. She is the reason I was able to bring in the harvest this year. And she has not stolen from you, not threatened you. No, she has been nothing but helpful and kind. Eleanor turned to Grushna. You can preserve food. Yes. Grushna seemed startled by the question. Good. My hands shake too much to do it properly anymore, and I have a cellar full of vegetables that will rot if they are not put up soon. If you help me, I will pay you in coin and food. And I will tell anyone who asks that you are under my protection. Understood? Grushna stared at her. You would do that. I do not like waste, and I do not like bullies. Eleanor shot a pointed look at Marcus. If this girl can work, she can earn her keep like anyone else. That is how things should be. She is an orc, Marcus protested. She is also a skilled worker who is willing to labor for fair pay. That is more than I can say for some humans in this village. Eleanor's tone was withering. Now, are we going to stand here arguing all day, or can we get back to the festival? I want some of that roasted meat before it is all gone. The tension broke like a popped bubble. People laughed, some nervously, some genuinely. The crowd began to disperse, breaking into smaller groups, arguing or talking or simply going back to their festivities. Marcus stood in the center of the square, his face purple with rage, but he was alone now. His supporters had melted away, unwilling to stand against the combined weight of Father Benedict, Sarah, Eleanor, and the others who had spoken up. Callum felt like he could breathe again for the first time in hours. Grushna was shaking beside him, and he realized she was crying. He pulled her close, not caring who saw. We did it, he whispered. We actually did it. Not everyone accepted me, many still hate me. but some did. And that is enough to start with. The rest will come in time. Father Benedict approached, a broad smile on his weathered face. Well done, both of you. That took tremendous courage. Thank you, Callum said, his voice thick, for everything. Thank Widow Eleanor. That was a masterstroke on her part. The priest chuckled. No one argues with her. She is terrifying. Eleanor herself approached then, leaning on her walking stick. Up close, Callum could see the sharpness in her eyes, the intelligence. She looked Grushna up and down critically. Can you start tomorrow? Yes. Grushna seemed bewildered. Good. Come to my cottage at dawn. Bring jars if you have them and be prepared to work all day. I will feed you and pay you fairly. She paused. And girl, that was a brave thing you did today. Walking in here knowing half the village wanted you dead. Respect. She stumped away before Grushna could respond. Callum found himself grinning like an idiot. I think we just made our first real ally. I think your village is insane, Grushna said, but she was smiling too, tentative and hopeful. They spent the rest of the festival in a strange daze. Some people avoided them pointedly, turning away or leaving when they approached. But others came to speak with them, curious or cautiously friendly. Sarah brought them plates of food and sat with them while they ate, talking about the farm and the upcoming winter. Meredith came by to examine Grushna with shameless interest, asking questions about orc culture and life in the mountains. A few younger people approached shyly, clearly fascinated by the novelty of an orc in their midst, and Marcus watched from a distance, his eyes full of cold fury. But he made no move, said nothing. He was outnumbered and he knew it. As the sun began to set and the festival wound down, Callum and Grushna loaded back into their cart for the journey home. They were both exhausted, wrung out from the emotional intensity of the day. But as they left the village behind and the familiar landscape of the farm came into view, Callum felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Hope. The weeks that followed were not easy, but they were good. Grushna went to work for Widow Eleanor as promised, spending long days preserving the old woman's harvest. Eleanor, it turned out, was as sharp-tongued and demanding as an employer as she was in every other aspect of life. But she paid fairly and treated Grushna with respect. Word spread through the village, and soon other families began to cautiously approach, asking if Grushna would help them with their own preserving or other tasks. The work was not always steady, and the pay was not always generous, but it was enough. More than enough. Callum watched with pride as Grushna slowly, carefully, built a place for herself in the community. It was not acceptance, not fully. There were still plenty of people who crossed the street to avoid her, who would not meet her eyes, who whispered and pointed when she passed. But there were also people who nodded to her in greeting, who thanked her for her work, who began to see her as a person rather than a monster. And there was Marcus, always watching, always waiting. Callum knew the danger was not over. Men like Marcus did not forget grudges, and they did not give up easily. But for now, Marcus was kept in check by public opinion and the allies Callum and Grushna had built. For now, they were safe. Winter came hard and fast, blanketing the farm in snow and driving them indoors for days at a time. Callum and Grushna spent those long dark evenings by the fire, talking and reading and simply being together. They made plans for the spring, for the crops they would plant, the repairs they would make to the barn. They talked about the future in a way that felt real now, not just a desperate fantasy. One night, as they sat curled together on Callum's worn sofa with the fire crackling cheerfully, Grushna said quietly, "I want to marry you." Callum's heart stopped. He pulled back to look at her face, saw the seriousness there. "What? I want to marry you. I know it is not traditional. I know there are no laws that would recognize a marriage between a human and an orc, but I do not care. I want to stand in front of Father Benedict and whoever else will witness it and promise to spend my life with you. I want it to be official, real, recognized." She took a shaky breath. "Will you marry me, Callum Irwin?" "Yes." The word burst out of him before he could think, before he could question. "Yes, absolutely yes." Grushna laughed, the sound bright and joyous, and kissed him so hard they both tumbled off the sofa onto the floor. They lay there laughing like children, tangled together in front of the fire, and Callum thought he had never been happier in his entire life. They approached Father Benedict the next day, nervous and hopeful. The old priest listened to their request, his expression thoughtful. "There is no precedent for this," he said slowly. "No church doctrine, no legal framework. Marriages are meant to be between a man and a woman of the same species." Callum felt his heart sink, but then Father Benedict smiled, "which means there is also no law explicitly forbidding it. And as the priest for this village, I have the authority to perform marriages as I see fit. If you two wish to be married, I will marry you. God's love is for all his creations, and I will not stand in the way of that." Callum could have kissed the old priest. Grushna actually did, planting a smacking kiss on his weathered cheek that made him laugh in surprise. They set the date for the spring, wanting to wait until the weather was better and they could have the ceremony outside. They told their allies in the village and were touched when several offered to help. Sarah offered to make Grushna a dress. Eleanor insisted on providing food for the celebration. Meredith began planning decorations with an enthusiasm that bordered on terrifying. But they knew they had to tell Marcus. Or rather, Marcus would find out, and it was better to control the revelation than to let him discover it by accident. Callum went to the village alone on a cold morning in late winter, seeking out Marcus at the tavern where he and his friends typically gathered. The conversation that followed was tense and ugly, with Marcus making his feelings abundantly clear. But in the end, there was nothing he could do. The village had not turned against Callum and Grushna, and without public support, Marcus was powerless to act. "You will regret this," Marcus said, his voice low and venomous. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday that monster will show her true colors. And when she does, I will be there to say I told you so, right before I kill her." "If you threaten her again, I will go to the headman," Callum said quietly. "I have witnesses to your threats, people who will speak against you. You might not like Grushna, but the village respects the law. Threatening murder is still a crime." Marcus's face twisted with rage, but he said nothing more. Callum left the tavern feeling shaken but victorious. The threat was not gone, but it was contained. For now, spring came slowly, melting the snow and revealing the brown earth beneath. Callum and Grushna worked the fields together, preparing for planting, and Callum marveled at how much easier everything was with two sets of hands. The farm that had been failing when his parents died was thriving now. They had food, they had each other, and soon they would have a marriage. The wedding was set for the first day of true spring, when the apple trees were just beginning to bud. They held it in Callum's yard, with Father Benedict officiating and about 20 people in attendance. It was not everyone in the village, not even close, but it was the people who mattered. The people who had stood by them, who had given them a chance. Grushna wore the dress Sarah had made, a simple gown of green fabric that matched her skin tone beautifully. Callum wore his father's vest, and a shirt he had painstakingly cleaned and mended. They stood together under the apple trees, hands clasped, and spoke vows that Father Benedict had helped them write. "I promise to stand by you," Callum said, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face. "In good times and bad, in peace and danger, for all the days of my life. I promise to see you, not as the world sees you, but as you truly are." Kind, brave, beautiful. My partner, my love, my wife. I promise to protect you, Grushna said, her own voice thick with emotion. To work beside you, to build a life with you, to show you every day that you are loved and valued. I promise to be your strength when you are weak, your comfort when you are hurting, your joy when you are happy. My husband, my heart, my home. Father Benedict pronounced them married, and they kissed while their friends applauded and cheered. Callum felt like his chest might burst from happiness. This was his wife. This incredible, brave, beautiful orc woman was his wife. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. There was food and music, and people danced in the yard as the sun set. Even some of the more skeptical villagers who had not been invited to the ceremony came by to offer cautious congratulations. It was not universal acceptance, but it was progress. As the evening wore on and their guests began to leave, Callum and Grushna found themselves alone in their yard, the stars coming out overhead. Grushna leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "I cannot believe this is real," she said softly. "A year ago I was cast out, alone, certain I would die in the wilderness. Now I am married, I have a home, I have you. A year ago I was starving and hopeless, waiting to die on a failing farm," Callum replied. "Now I have a thriving farm, friends, a future, and you, always you." "Always," Grushna agreed. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms under the stars. Tomorrow they would go back to work, back to the daily grind of running a farm and navigating a community that still did not fully accept them. There would be challenges and setbacks, and probably more threats from Marcus and people like him. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight they were simply two people in love, married and happy and home. The years that followed were not perfect. There were hard times when the crops failed or illness swept through the village. There were moments of prejudice and cruelty, times when Grushna was denied entry to a shop, or when someone spat at her feet in the street. Marcus never fully gave up his hatred, though he never acted on his threats either, kept in check by the growing number of people who accepted or at least tolerated Grushna's presence. But there were also good times. Wonderful times. The farm prospered beyond Callum's wildest dreams, becoming one of the most productive in the region. Grushna's reputation as a skilled preserver and worker spread, and soon people from neighboring villages were seeking her services. They made friends, real friends, people who saw past species and prejudice to the individuals beneath. And 2 years after their wedding, on a warm summer morning, Grushna gave birth to their daughter. She was a beautiful blend of both her parents, with her mother's green skin and pointed ears but her father's brown eyes and human features. They named her Mara, and from the moment she entered the world with a lusty cry, she owned both their hearts completely. Mara grew up strong and curious, asking endless questions about everything she saw. Some in the village whispered about her, called her a half-breed or worse, but their closest friends doted on her. Widow Aliner, now very old but still sharp as a tack, claimed her as an honorary granddaughter. Father Benedict baptized her and gave her religious instruction alongside the human children. Sarah taught her to sew. Meredith told her stories of brave heroes and clever heroines. And every night, Callum and Grushna tucked her into bed and told her that she was loved, that she was special, that she was exactly who she was meant to be. On the 5th anniversary of the day Callum had opened his cellar to find it filled with preserves, he and Grushna stood in that same cellar, looking at the shelves now stocked with food they had grown and preserved together. Mara was asleep upstairs, worn out from a day of playing with the neighbor children. The farm was quiet around them, peaceful. "You remember when you first found these?" Grushna asked, gesturing to the preserves. "I thought I was hallucinating," Callum admitted with a laugh. I could not understand who would do such a thing, why anyone would help me. I could not understand why I was doing it either at first. I told myself it was just practical, that I needed to preserve food anyway, and it might as well go to someone who needed it. But the truth is, I think I was already falling in love with you even then, watching you struggle and never give up, seeing your kindness to your animals, the way you talked to yourself while you worked. I was drawn to you before we ever met. I am glad you were. I am glad you filled my cellar with preserves and gave me a reason to hope again. Callum pulled her close. You saved my life, Grushna, in every way that matters. You saved mine too. You gave me a home when I had none. You gave me a family. You gave me a reason to believe that love could be stronger than hate. They climbed the stairs together, hand in hand, and checked on their sleeping daughter before retiring to their own room. As Callum lay in bed that night with his wife curled against him and his child safe under his roof, he thought about how much had changed in 5 years. How much pain and struggle and fear, but also how much joy and love and hope. He thought about that desperate man who had opened a cellar door expecting emptiness and found abundance instead. Who had met an orc woman and chosen to see her as a person rather than a monster. Who had risked everything for love and found that the risk was worth it. And he thought about the future, about watching Mara grow, about growing old with Grushna beside him, about the life they would continue to build together despite all the obstacles in their way. It would not be easy. Prejudice did not disappear overnight. But they had proven that it could be overcome, that understanding could triumph over fear, that love could bridge even the widest divides. That was enough. That was everything. Callum closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep with a smile on his face, his wife's breathing steady and warm against his chest and his daughter's soft snores audible through the wall. His family, his home, his happily ever after, hard-won and precious and real. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, and the world continued on, full of hate and hope in equal measure. But in that small farmhouse on the edge of the kingdom, 3 people slept peacefully, safe in the knowledge that they were loved and that they belonged to each other. And that, in the end, was all that truly mattered.